In the 4th century, in the region of Gaul, Saint Martin of Tours lived within deliberate restraint, shaped by monastic discipline, pastoral responsibility, and long habits of silence, forming a spiritual posture where discernment matured slowly through obedience rather than through visions as signs or extraordinary expectations. Before becoming Bishop of Tours, Martin had withdrawn repeatedly from public honor, choosing solitude and prayer, believing that spiritual clarity develops not through authority or reputation, but through sustained humility, attention to conscience, and fidelity to the remembered pattern of Christ's earthly life. Within this environment of disciplined faith, spiritual encounters were not sought but tested, and Martin understood that not every appearance carried truth, especially in an age when many claimed revelations, visions, or divine authority without grounding in apostolic teaching or communal memory. Ancient sources describe Martin as cautious toward spiritual excitement, preferring stability over novelty and measuring inner experiences against scripture and tradition, a habit that prepared him to face deception without fear, confusion, or reliance on emotional reaction when confronted unexpectedly. During one such period of prayerful solitude, tradition recounts that a radiant figure appeared suddenly, presenting itself with confidence and splendor, declaring its identity as Christ, arriving without humility, without reference to suffering, and without the quiet tone Martin associated with truth. Rather than responding immediately, Martin remained composed, allowing the moment to unfold without haste, observing posture, language, and presence, understanding that discernment requires patience, and that falsehood often reveals itself through inconsistency rather than through overt contradiction. Martin's attention focused not on brightness or authority, but on absence, recognizing that the figure lacked the marks of crucifixion, the wounds through which Christ had revealed obedience, sacrifice, and redemption, signs inseparable from the Church's understanding of the incarnate Lord. This careful observation reflected 4th century theological emphasis. Christ is known through the cross, not through spectacle, and any manifestation separating glory from suffering departs from the gospel's core, regardless of persuasive appearance or confident declaration. Martin addressed the figure calmly, stating that Christ would not appear without the signs of his passion, expressing no anger or fear, but grounding his response in doctrine, showing that discernment speaks quietly, relying on truth rather than confrontation or ritual force. At these words, the figure vanished instantly, leaving silence behind, confirming that deception cannot endure when measured against the cross, and establishing this account as a lesson in spiritual vigilance, teaching believers to test every spirit through humility, memory, and theological coherence. In the aftermath of the encounter, Martin did not proclaim triumph or recount the vision publicly, but returned to silence, understanding that true authority is confirmed not by narration, but by consistency, allowing the event to settle into memory rather than immediate explanation or display. Within the monastic community, the incident was preserved carefully, not as spectacle, but as instruction, shaping how monks understood discernment, teaching that deception often appears clothed in confidence, while truth remains patient, restrained, and aligned with the memory of Christ's suffering. Early writers emphasized that the adversary did not arrive through terror, but through imitation, reminding readers that falsehood rarely announces itself openly. Instead, borrowing sacred language, familiar symbols, and expected forms, hoping recognition will replace careful testing and theological attention. In 4th century Gaul, such caution held practical weight, as movements built on visions had already caused division, leading church leaders to insist that spiritual experiences be judged through continuity, humility, and alignment with apostolic teaching rather than novelty or emotional intensity. Martin's story circulated because it reinforced this discipline, offering a concrete example where discernment depended neither on rank nor ritual, but on memory of the crucified Christ, whose wounds defined his identity more clearly than brilliance, authority, or supernatural display. Later generations repeated the account without embellishment, noting its restraint and using it to caution believers that visions lacking the cross should provoke reflection, not devotion, reinforcing the idea that spiritual maturity recognizes truth through coherence rather than excitement alone. The narrative gradually became a teaching tool, read aloud in communities where humility was prized, reminding listeners that discernment grows from formation over time, and that sudden certainty often signals danger when separated from patience, obedience, and shared ecclesial memory. Rather than encouraging fear of deception, the story offered confidence, assuring believers that careful attention to Christ's suffering provides a stable measure, enabling even quiet individuals to stand firm without confrontation, spectacle, or reliance on extraordinary spiritual authority claims or visions. Martin himself remained largely silent about the event, allowing others to record it later, a choice consistent with his life, where authority emerged through conduct, not testimony, and where credibility was protected by restraint rather than repeated assertion or public insistence. Through this legacy, the encounters shaped Christian spirituality beyond its moment, reinforcing a lasting principle: any claim to divine presence must pass through the cross, or it will fade quickly, unable to endure the steady light of discernment and shared memory. In later centuries, the story of St. Martin endured not as miracle folklore, but as guidance, shaping Christian reflection on discernment, reminding communities that faith matures through testing, and that spiritual authority proves itself through coherence, humility, and fidelity to the cross. Teachers and monks return to this account when addressing visions and dreams, using Martin's restraint to argue that authentic encounters never bypass suffering, and that Christ is recognized most clearly where obedience, vulnerability, and memory of the Passion remain inseparable. Across medieval preaching, the episode functioned as a warning, not against seeing, but against trusting appearances, reinforcing that deception often imitates expectation, while truth bears continuity with Scripture, tradition, and the humility revealed through Christ's wounded body in history and worship. The account also shaped pastoral counsel, teaching believers to remain steady when confronted by confidence or brilliance, to pause rather than react, and to remember that spiritual authenticity unfolds over time, confirmed by endurance, obedience, and alignment with the cruciform pattern. In theological reflection, Martin's discernment illustrates that the devil's failure lay not in weakness, but in misjudging the centrality of the cross, assuming glory could persuade without sacrifice, a mistake consistently exposed by disciplined spiritual attention within the church over generations of believers. This narrative resisted sensational retelling, surviving precisely because it discouraged obsession with visions, redirecting focus toward formation, patience, and ethical fruit, ensuring that discernment remained a communal practice rather than a private claim to exceptional insight within the church tradition. For audiences today, the story retains relevance, offering a framework for navigating claims of spiritual certainty. urging listeners to test experiences gently, without cynicism or fear, by measuring them against humility, continuity, and the enduring mark of the cross alone. It suggests that discernment is less about dramatic confrontation and more about quiet fidelity, cultivated through prayer, learning, and memory, where truth emerges gradually and where falsehood cannot sustain itself without departing from the cross-centered narrative of Christian faith and worship. St. Martin's example ultimately reframes holiness, not as visionary privilege, but as disciplined attention to what has been revealed, showing that clarity arises when believers resist spectacle and remain anchored in the suffering love at Christianity's center across time and history. Thus, the account concludes without triumph or fear, leaving a quiet instruction. Christ is known where wounds are remembered, humility is preserved, and discernment guards the soul, ensuring that faith rests not on appearances, but on the enduring truth of the cross.